Welcome to the Care Right podcast, your go-to resource for all things elder care. Guiding us through this journey is Annalee Kruger, the founder of Care Right Incorporated, and she has been steadfastly supporting families across the United States. Each episode brings you expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical advice, ensuring that you're well equipped to provide the best possible care for your loved ones. Expect to gain valuable knowledge, learn from real-life stories, and get inspired to take action in your own caregiving journey. So buckle up as we dive into an in-depth discussion of elder care planning and together embrace the journey of caring for aging loved ones on the Care Right podcast.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, this Happy Tuesday. We've got a few more people coming in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We always aim to start on time and end on time. So for a couple of housekeeping items, we are in webinar mode today. So that means that we can't see you or hear you, but we do know you're there. The chat box feature is working. So if you guys have questions, we invite each of you to put your questions in the chat box as we're going along. I'll be monitoring that and I'm reading those questions out. We're going to get to just as many as we can. Today's meeting is being recorded, and everybody that has registered for this meeting will get a copy of the slides as well as a link to the recording after the fact. So Allison Scarborough here, Consolidated Planning Group. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're really, really glad you're here. If you have been attending a lot of our webinars, we're certainly glad that you are back. We do a lot of advocacy and a lot of webinars aim to put tools and resources in your hands when it comes to planning for a loved one with a disability or special care needs. And so today what we're going to be talking about is, are you ready for crisis? And so without further ado, I would like to just introduce Annalee Kruger with Care Right Inc. She has an awesome organization, and her organization is really designed and helping people plan for the crisis times really ahead of time. And we're huge proponents of that. For people that typically attend and kind of go through meetings with me, they know that I'm a proponent of planning ahead. Let's not wait till the crisis happens and then realize, whoops, I meant to do that, and it really, really didn't get done. So, Annalee, it's certainly our pleasure to have you back with us today. Without anything further, please take it away and share with us a little bit more about you and your company.
Excellent. Very good. Thanks, Allison. And hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time away from your busy days to learn about crisis management or crisis planning. My name is Annalee Kruger. I'm the owner of Care Right. I work with families, or me and my team work with families all across the country in developing customized aging plans, facilitating family meetings, helping you understand the new jargon that you're going to need to know as you enter kind of that long-term care space if you have aging parents, but also putting that customized aging plan in place and helping families understand family dynamics, shifting family dynamics, current care needs, future care needs, and how to cost that out so that you know how to budget for that properly, but also how to interview home care companies, how to broach these topics with your parents, and how to really make sure that you have everything buttoned up, from funeral arrangements, estate documents, accounts, passwords, your whole grab and go binder, and definitely opening the doors of communication to all family members about why it's important to plan ahead versus waiting until you're in crisis. And then, like Allison said, nobody wants an oops. Oops.
For sure.
Are expensive. Oops are expensive.
Well, and Annalee, the people, that are attending today that are listening in, I mean, we are all across the board. So we have some families that might have young kids with special needs. We may have some families that have kids that are transitioning into adulthood. And then we may have some seniors that are already retired and they're kind of looking at these things for themselves, or they may be already retired and have an adult disabled child. So when we're talking about these things today, as you're kind of thinking about this and processing some of these things, what I would say is don't just think about your loved one with a disability. Yes, they count, but where are you on the aging, category? And maybe, okay, you say, hey, I'm in my 50s, I'm feeling good, this is great, but do you have aging parents or aging loved ones in your life? So it kind of crosses over generations, and a lot of the families that we serve are, planning for what happens when I'm gone with my loved one that has care needs, beyond my own life. So I think it crosses over all of those categories. Don't you agree, Annalee?
I absolutely do, because here's the reality. We know that at least 58% of adult kids will get thrust into the role of family caregiving without ever having any kind of family meetings about the what whens of aging. And if you have already devoted your whole life and your energy to caring for a child with special needs, then when you get that crisis call that dad just had a stroke and he's the caregiver to mom who has dementia, you're like, I have nothing left to give. So the more that we can plan ahead for literally both generations, mom and dad and your child and you, the better outcomes everyone will have. I mean, there's certain times to be willy-nilly in life, and health and aging and care needs is not that time to be willy-nilly and just hope for the best. So that slide just talks about just kind of what we do. Most of my clients come to us, unfortunately, in crisis mode, where dad had a stroke. He's the caregiver to mom. What do? We live in, Arizona, but my parents live, somewhere else. And my family's never talked about, what mom and dad's wishes are or what they have in place. And I don't know if I'm the power of attorney. And so that's the angst that people have when they call us, when they're in crisis mode. That can all be prevented if we start working together now and put that aging plan in place, so that your family relationships all across the board, at home and with your siblings and with your aging parents, can stay as healthy as possible. And you have peace of mind knowing that when that crisis call comes, you've got an aging plan in place for mom and dad. Or when that crisis call comes that your special needs adult child had an incident, you've got that plan in place because you've got a special care needs plan in place already. So, but we've got different services for all across the board, different resource levels. And then, of course, the book, The Invisible Patient, is available on Amazon or on the Invisible Patient website as well. We won't worry about Plan for Life, because that's for financial planners to become an elder planning specialist and better identify and meet the needs of their senior book of business now. But we won't worry about that for this one. So this is what we're going to cover today, just an organized approach to prepare for end-of-life concerns. So you can go through that overview, services, planning, mistakes that most families make in my experience, expectations and considerations. And I'm also going to share with you when I did my estate documents and my living wills and my power of attorney and my HIPAA documents, just specific things in my own power of attorney my healthcare power of attorney documents that I want my decision makers to know, but I've also actually verbally communicated that with them. And that's one of the mistakes I see families make, is they may get their documents in order, but they never actually have dialogue about it. So when we talk about,
Can I just mention here that this is just a great place, and I'm always mentioning these things. Our documents are so important, and I would say it's probably right on up there. 98% of people either don't have documents or they have really outdated documents that are really no longer accurate. So these documents are, I always say, they're not a DIY project where you're going to download something off the internet. You're going to want to work with an estate planning attorney to get your documents in order. You're going to want to have intentional conversations with your parents on their documents, because a lot of times they did theirs 15 or 20 years ago. And then also, these healthcare power of attorney and powers of attorney, these are also documents. We don't think about this often, but you may want to consider having those documents in place for your kids that you're sending off to college, right? Your neurotypical kids that you're sending off to college. These are things that so I would first like to say you're not alone. For anybody that's out there and says, yes, I don't have this, or no, it hasn't been updated, this is a problem. You guys have had this on your list and you're going to get it done, and then life gets busy and then we don't get it. You're not alone, but I just want to, mention just how critically important these documents truly are.
They are, because it is a matter of life and death and quality of life and financial as well. So and we can break that down real quickly. When I talk about life or death, if you don't have your documents in order and you know that you don't want feeding tubes and anything to prolong your life, well, if you don't have this all documented and your family knows about it, or whomever you've named as your power of attorney, you're likely going to end up with things inserted into your body that you don't want. So if you feel strongly about having control and having a say in what happens to you, if you lose capacity, if you get in that car accident tonight on the way home from work, please, 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 please just put it in your calendar. Get my estate documents in order. And I can't back up what Allison said enough. Going on these online legal docs, whatever, there's a time and a place to cut the budget, and it is not with legal advice and having your paperwork in order. And so end of life overview, it's important to remember that no matter what diagnosis you or your loved ones have, you can still enjoy a good quality of life for many years, but especially if you plan for it and you know where things are heading. Like if your loved one needs more care than what can be provided at home, what does that next step look like? But you have to plan ahead on every aspect of this journey in life that we're all on. I always say that aging and caregiving can be a positive experience when we actually have a plan in place. We know what the disease is how the disease is going to affect our loved one and their finances and their quality of life. The more that we know and the more that we can understand what we're dealing with, the better off everyone is going to be, because then we can backfill with whatever kind of care supports are in need for future and also right now, so that as family caregivers, you don't get burned out and overwhelmed. Usually that happens because you don't have a plan and you don't have enough supports in place. So we really want to safeguard you as family members in that journey, but you really want to work closely with your medical team, and they can help ensure that your loved one or you, if you're on this webinar and you have a terminal condition, the goal is really to keep you as comfortable as long as possible. So when we talk about end of life services, there's the palliative care, or what we call in healthcare, we call it comfort care. It's designed to ease the pain for anyone with a serious, chronic, long-term illness. It could be dementia, it could be cancer, it could be renal failure. It can be appropriate whether someone is in the dying process or not. So when we talk about palliative care, this means that if you have renal failure and you're taking dialysis, you can still be on palliative care. So you can still treat whatever ailment or disease you have because you want to be comfortable. Palliative care is also really helpful because you have a whole team. You have a palliative care nurse that comes to visit you. You have a palliative care social worker. You get equipment, the equipment that you might need, whether it's wheelchair, walker, a different type of bed or a mattress to keep you comfortable. But the core of the program is also about education so that you can make informed decisions about your treatment as your disease continues to progress and you lose mobility or lose independence or lose functionality. This requires a doctor's order. I know that's probably not in here, but it requires a doctor's order. Hopefully your medical team is proactively talking to you about what your care options can be. But if not, then you need to work with a different type of professional that can help guide you in this. Hospice care is for, that also requires a physician's order. Hospice is a Medicare A program, so you can't overlap. So if mom fell and she broke her hip and she needs to go to a skilled rehab unit for physical therapy and occupational therapy, she can't be on hospice at the same time because that's double billing for Medicare. So she'd have to bump off of hospice while she's at rehab, and then she can go back into hospice. Hospice, sometimes people think, oh, you have to be like immediately dying or right transitioning into that dying process. Unfortunately, that's the problem, is most people think that. So they don't consider hospice until death is pretty imminent, when really the sooner that we can start getting patients on hospice level of care, the better they do, because they can really maximize that program. With hospice, again, just like with palliative care, the whole family is the client. And so their goal is to help educate the family about the condition that their loved one has, but also continually assess and evaluate, okay, what do we need to change in the hospice care plan? Is it time that now mom needs a mattress that is an airflow mattress so that she doesn't end up with pressure sores? And what other services do we need to incorporate? Hospice, people can graduate, so to speak, off of the hospice program. And sometimes they do, because now they have enough supports in place that they improve enough that now they don't qualify to stay on the program. So the more declines that you or your loved one have, like communication impairment, mobility, frequency of urinary tract infections or other infections, or just hospitalizations, increased frequency of hospitalizations, and then diagnoses that we know are terminal, like Parkinson's, dementia, renal failure. Those are kind of categories, if you will, for good opportunities to participate in the hospice program.
And I would suggest here, I've had a lot of experience with this over the last couple of years. And, those really, really intentional conversations with your loved ones in your life of what your wishes are. Yes, you've got your legal documents, you've got things on paper, but there comes a point in time where the communication has ended or it has stopped. A person has had a stroke. They don't have the cognitive ability to communicate. Maybe they can't speak anymore. Maybe they understand, but they can't speak. There's so many things. And so don't let it be a coulda, woulda, shoulda. I wish I woulda asked these things. And nobody, I think the reality of it is nobody really wants to talk about death or the end, or, but I think that it becomes a very emotional time when people are going through this with somebody that they love and they want to do what's best and what's right. And then when you hadn't had these real conversations, nobody knows what's coming and what's down the road, but at least having some basis, like definitively knowing some of these things, and just chatting about it, I think it's important. And one way to open the door, I think also, is to share yourself. Share, this is how I feel, and I wanted you to know. I wanted to share this with somebody, or kind of talk about that with somebody else. And then the people, because I hear people say, well, our parents, they keep their cards very close to their chest. They don't want to talk about this stuff. But letting them in on, hey, here's some of the things that we're thinking about, and I hope you never see this in your lifetime, but in case you do, I want you to know this. I want you to hear this from my mouth.
Well, and
real important.
The more that we can normalize these types of conversations, because none of us are getting out of here alive, right? So death is going to happen. So we might as well be prepared and have the best kind of dying experience possible, or end of life experience possible. One thing, and I don't think it's in the slide deck, but one exercise you could do to just open up the doors of communication is leverage this webinar and say, I listened to this webinar today and it really got me thinking about kind of some of the gaps in my planning, but also just, you're right. No one wants to think about end of life until they're forced into it, but that's not the time to have to then scramble and get your documents and your thoughts and emotions in order. So one tip or one suggestion may be not only to talk to an estate attorney and get all these documents in order, but there's a document called the 5 Wishes. Now, it's not valid or honored in all 50 states, but it is valid in most of them. So wherever you are in the world, you can check to see if 5 wishes is a document that your state honors. But it's a really good kind of workbook, and it's built for the consumer in mind. So it's not medical terminology that you're not going to understand, but it's called the 5 wishes, the number 5 wishes. And that could be kind of an exercise that you can do, so you personally can do, so that you can start kind of framing this in your head and then say, I filled this document out. It gave me a lot of things to think about. Let's do this as a family. And then you can use it as an estate document, or you can also then go ahead and work with an estate attorney. But it is a good tool. Sometimes people will use that as a stepping stone to at least get a little bit more comfortable with the idea of, if I can't communicate, how are people going to properly take care of me in the way that I want to be taken care of?
We had someone in the chat box that says, who makes the best medical team? I know that doctors sometimes don't like to give up. Will emergency rooms accept a DNR request, which
Right.
is do not resuscitate, is what the
Yeah.
DNR, just in case. And we always throw acronyms around. Not everybody always knows. So
Yeah, the jargon that we have in healthcare, that's why when we're working with families, we teach you the jargon that you're going to need to know so that you can be an informed consumer. But one thing that I do, and you can take this as a takeaway from the webinar, is I carry my living will, my HIPAA document, and my healthcare power of attorney, and my DNR, my do not resuscitate. I carry those 4 documents in my purse. There's a copy in my glove box in my car, and in my work bag. Because if you've ever, because I do crisis management, so I don't want to be in a vulnerable position. And I've spent plenty of time in nursing homes, long-term care facilities, memory care, ICU units, seeing my clients. I'm very clear on my idea of what quality of life is like. And I don't want to have feeding tubes. I don't want to have a ventilator. I don't want to have any of that stuff. So I carry my documents, and I'm really glad that I do, because on my 40th birthday, I got hit by a school bus while I was crossing the street. Fortunately, I did not lose capacity, like mental capacity. And so I was able to pull out my documents. I couldn't speak because I had a broken face, but you never know what's going to happen to you. And so why not just be prepared? So when I got hit by the bus, thankfully I didn't lose capacity, but I pulled out my documents in my purse, and the paramedics was like, wow, she'd been a paramedic for 30 years, and she'd never had anybody pull out their documents. So, I take this stuff seriously, because I don't want any of that stuff done to me. So the only way to prevent that is make sure that I'm prepared, and that my family, my power of attorneys, know exactly what my wishes are. And I have it spelled out. I have a 2-page addendum in my healthcare proxy about what my daily routine is, the foods I like to eat, because just in case I can't verbalize or communicate, I like to sleep on my side. I don't like to get up early. I have everything about myself written down in a 2-page addendum in my healthcare proxy, so that no one has to guess about what Annalee considers quality of life. So that's something that you may want to think about. If you're as passionate about your ability to advocate for yourself and voice your wants and needs.
someone else said, is my understanding is EMTs do not honor DNRs, so a separate one is needed for them. Can you comment on that? I don't have any knowledge on that. I've always seen, everything I've seen is that, whatever your documents you have, as long as they were signed and the person that signed them was of sound mind at the time that they signed them, they have to be honored.
Yeah, I can't speak to that, so I don't know why they wouldn't honor them. I would think that if they didn't know they were in existence, then they wouldn't know to honor them. But like I said, if you want to, it's better to just be safe than sorry. I carry those 4 documents with me, so they
it
don't.
It may have been too for an EMT. They might have just thought, hey, this is above my category here. This needs a supervisor. Like I'm sure that they do have protocols for that, because obviously EMTs are on the scene in life and death situations. So there may be more to that. So thanks for putting that out there in the chat box.
Yeah. So end of life planning, obviously, if you have heard, the message is planning ahead. Nobody expects to have that major stroke. All the people that had major strokes last Thursday didn't wake up thinking, oh, I think I'm going to have a major stroke, lose my ability to speak, lose my ability to express my wants and needs, and not be able to, advocate for myself. No one wakes up that way. I didn't wake up on my 40th birthday in Sheboygan, Wisconsin and think, oh, I think I'm going to get run over by a school bus today because she's distracted by the kids on the bus. I didn't wake up that morning thinking that, but these are the things that happen. And so we want to just plan ahead. The 4 documents, just because I saw the chat box come up, the 4 documents are your DNR, or for me, it's a DNR, my health care proxy, my living will, and my HIPAA document. And the HIPAA document, just because we're on that right now, is really important because if you don't have your HIPAA documents in place, the medical team can't communicate to your healthcare power of attorney. They can't communicate. So if your family calls a hospital, if they're not listed as someone that they can share information with, you're on your own. So you have to make sure everything is buttoned up. It's just the responsible thing to do. Otherwise, it's going to be a real headache for your family trying to get information and trying to advocate for you. So when we think about special needs planning, and obviously Allison and her team do this as well, when I say special needs planning from a Care Right Incorporated, from my business perspective, it's more of the adult, the vulnerable adult, maybe the person with Down syndrome or the adult with autism that may not be able to manage, living on their own, or they may need more care advocacy or care coordination. But we want to make sure that anybody in our family, and ourselves included, are properly protected with the right documents and understand what care options are available ahead of time, instead of waiting until, if Ethel and Marvin are in their 90s and they have their son, John, who is 60 with Down syndrome and lives with Ethel and Marvin. Well, Ethel and Marvin are struggling at home trying to take care of each other. And now son John needs help and support. You can see how that's a recipe for disaster if there's no aging plan or special needs planning. And John has never lived on his own because he's always lived with his mom and dad, but now his mom and dad need to potentially move into a care community. John is too young to get into a care community, so he can't move in with his parents. So that's why it's important to, combine that special needs planning so that everybody in the family has a plan in place for current and future care needs.
Someone said, do we need a HIPAA release if we have guardianship? Not in Texas. So I would preface that by saying that a lot of the people that are attending today, I know we do have a podcast or whatever. So you'll have to check with your state. But if you have guardianship of the person, that unless you have a limited guardianship that is not that does not include healthcare decisions, you would not need a HIPAA release. You would have to provide the articles of guardianship, and then they would have to accept those.
Mm-hmm. And I am not an attorney, so that's more of, in my mind, that's more of a legal question. So you definitely want to talk to your attorney to make sure that you have everything in place that you and your loved one needs. Life-sustaining treatments is CPR, where they do the chest compressions and breathe in your mouth. So you have to decide, okay, if I stop breathing and my heart stops, do I want to be revived? Do I want someone to try to resuscitate me? You need to think about how long you might have been technically dead or without life, which is dead, and what that could look like, your quality of life. It depends on how healthy you are, your age, how long you've been without oxygen to your brain. But thinking about what does that really look like, just even if CPR or the chest compressions were successful and effective and they were able to bring you back to life, you need to still think about, okay, but what if I'm now a vegetable, or what if I can't walk anymore, or what if I can't verbalize my wants and needs? So there's a lot to think about with those end of life planning, with as far as do not resuscitate, or if you want to be resuscitated. Life-sustaining treatments obviously also include feeding tubes, respirators, any machine or any tube that's going to keep you alive. Think about that. I've always been a do not resuscitate, because again, I've worked in long-term care and nursing homes since I was like 12 as a candy striper. So I am very clear on what my wishes and quality of life are like. But I have to admit, when COVID hit, when the pandemic hit, I did really have to do some soul searching and be like, okay, do I need to update my documents? And maybe I do want, to be resuscitated, or maybe I do want a ventilator. I did opt not to update my documents, but it does, when there's a personal situation, maybe a friend or a neighbor or a family member that has a health issue, hopefully it does make you kind of stop and think, well, if this happened to me, what would I want done, and make sure that it's documented. Do not resuscitate is obviously, they're not going to do anything if your heart stops and you're no longer breathing. Brain autopsy and donation, both may provide researchers a better understanding of the diseases and disorders, whether it's Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, PSP, any other type of diagnosis. One other thing in here that I see we didn't include in here, but is like donation. Do you want to donate any of your body parts? So a donation, if you do, you want to make sure that that's on your driver's license. Funeral and burial plans. I can't stress this enough. The more that we can have a plan in place for everything, the easier it's going to be for our family. Most of my clients don't have their funeral arrangements in place. They don't have their estate documents in order. And that's why those adult kids are calling me in crisis, because again, dad just had a stroke. He's the caregiver to mom. And, dad dies from the stroke, and the kids are now grieving the death of their father. What do we do with mom? Because dad took care of her and she can't stay home by herself. And I can't quit my job to go live with mom and take care of her. And now they have to plan a funeral and pay for a funeral. And if your family is never talked about, or you don't have the financial power of attorney, how are you going to pay all these bills? And then if mom doesn't have an advance directive or the estate documents in order, you might have to go through guardianship court, and that can be thousands of dollars. So the more that we can have all this buttoned up before the what whens, not what ifs, but the what whens happen, you're going to be doing yourself and your family a favor. The other thing about funeral planning is you should be able to just grieve. You should be able to put your energy into grieving, but there's so much business part of a death, like planning the funeral. If your loved one didn't plan one, someone has to. And finding the pictures and, well, what would mom want for her funeral? But then you have to get all the death certificates and you have to notify everybody of the death. And so there's all this business part of the death that can take months and years sometimes, depending on how unplanned legally your loved ones left you. And so you don't really get a chance to grieve. And by the time the funeral happens, everyone else gets on with their life. And then you're like, okay, now where did my support go? Because I was busy planning the funeral. The grab and go binder, if you've been on my other webinar that I've done previously with Allison and her team, we've talked extensively about the grab and go binder. I'm going to just give you a breakdown and show you what it looks like. But it's a grab and go binder because, again, one of the reasons I started Care Right, one of the many reasons, is because families don't talk about the what whens of aging. And they don't know if mom and dad name them as a power of attorney. They don't know if their parents have a long-term care insurance policy. They don't know that mom and dad have a storage unit full of antiques. They don't know what mom and dad's accounts and passwords are. So when dad has that stroke, you can't step in and help pay bills and help support people because you don't have the information you need to stay, to do your job if you're named as the power of attorney. And a lot of families don't know if dad was a veteran or mom was a veteran. So this way it's a whole checklist. It's that entire checklist of everything you have to have in place. A lot of adult kids don't know who their parents' financial planner is, or who their estate attorney is, or who's the carrier for long-term care insurance. So it's really just an organizational tool. And a lot of people might have some of this already in a file, or say, if something happens to me, look at the blue file in my desk. But we really need to start opening up the doors of conversation about, this is specifically what I have in place. Do you have any questions? These are what my wishes are. Do you have any questions? And make sure that the people who you've named as a power of attorney have the documents, because again, no one plans to have that stroke. And if you don't have copies of these documents, the hospital needs them. And you don't want to have to fly to Arizona from Ohio, because that's where mom and dad live, just to like try to find these documents. And unfortunately, that's what most of the families end up doing. And that's why they're calling me, because they're really overwhelmed.
Annalee, on the funeral and the burial plans, the prepaid funerals, that is something for special needs families. You're getting this SSI. We never want our kids to have more than $2,000 in their name. A prepaid burial or cremation is totally allowed under the rules of the Social Security Administration. So I wanted to mention that. And you mentioned veterans. So I've worked a lot with veterans in the past, and the one thing that is hard for people to put their hands on is the DD 214. So if you're wanting a military burial with, with honors and all the stuff that they do, someone's got to put their hands on the DD 214. So working on that now, not waiting till after somebody passes away. And I am a huge proponent of these prepaid funerals. A lot of them, not all of them, have some kind of partnership with Dignity Memorial, which is a huge corporation. So you're safe, okay? And, they have bonds and everything like that. So your investment is protected. But most of the time what you're doing when you're prepaying for a cremation or for a burial, they're buying a final expense policy, basically. So you pay your fee, they buy the final expense policy, and that pays upon your death and covers those services. So I'm just a fan of that. And I know that there's probably not a ton of people on here with veteran stuff, but certainly there are some. But that DD 214 is going to be a super important document if we want military honors funerals. Okay. Okay, is the Grab and Go binder on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel? Yeah, that previous, the previous webinar that we had with Annalee is on the YouTube channel, and then the carerightinc.com, you've got that out there as well. So Thank you for that.
Yep. And the military, that's part of the, that's part of the Grab and Go binder as well. It's just a huge checklist of just different things that you need that will help trigger you, like, oh, I didn't even think about that. And the other really valuable thing about, having all these, the Grab and Go binder and the different checklists is, if you were always sitting on the fence of like, oh, that's right, I forgot to look into long-term care insurance for myself, or I forgot to do this, I need to get my stuff done too. Again, doing this as a family project, kind of like a team building or family project, can be really helpful and therapeutic, and make it so that your parents don't feel like, oh, what, I'm old now, so now you want me to do all this stuff. Well, everybody over the age of 18 needs to have all their affairs in order, and there's different age groups where you need to have, you got to get insurance and all those types of things while you can still qualify and pass underwriting. So otherwise it's going to be too late. Mistakes families make with end of life planning. Well, there's a lot, but we're going to just cover a few. Everyone thinks they have more time to put a plan together. So there's a lot of denial. They're like, oh, well, we'll have our family meeting at Christmas when we're all together. We'll have it at Thanksgiving. Well, what are you going to do if dad has a stroke in September and you're all like planning on having a conversation about the what whens of aging at the holidays? You missed your opportunity. So one of the questions families always ask on these webinars is, well, when is the time to start having these conversations or start thinking about it? Now, because the people that had strokes, the people that were in car accidents that no longer can vouch, that can no longer advocate for themselves, did not plan on that. It's just life has its own agenda. So don't fall into that category of being a crisis person, because it's going to be very hectic very quickly. So waiting until crisis mode versus proactive planning. One of the services that we offer is facilitating these family meetings and helping you identify, family relationships, family dynamics. What care do you need and how much is that going to cost? Because it's expensive to age, and Medicare does not cover all these costs that people think or assume that they do. And it does not. If you want care covered, your parents or you needed to buy long-term care insurance or some sort of financial solution ahead of time. The family meetings, the tone and dynamic of family meetings from a proactive family, there's laughter, there's joy, and we have the luxury of some time to put this plan together, versus a family who comes to me because dad had a stroke and he's the caregiver to mom with dementia. There's tears, there's accusations, there's like, we didn't know, dad never told us all this stuff about mom, and so the kids are blindsided. And you would hope that the aging process and a crisis would bring families together, but it definitely does not, in my experience. 85% of the families that come to me, I'm doing family mediation because they're that burned out, they're that overwhelmed, and they don't understand the diagnosis that their parent has. And so they don't know how to feel about it or how to navigate around it. Not having family meetings to discuss end of life wishes or the what whens of aging. Dad, if you have a stroke and you're the caregiver to mom, how do you want us to handle that situation if you die before mom? Where do you think she would want to live? And having they're uncomfortable conversations if you're not used to having them, but we need to have them so that we can put that plan together. And certainly not having their documents in order. Huge mistake, and a very expensive one, because now you're going to have to pay attorneys after hours. You're going to have to work with a lot of people that charge more after hours because you didn't plan ahead. Waiting too long before engaging with hospice and not really being able to fully benefit from all the value that hospice can provide. They have, the hospice nurse, that they have volunteers that can come in a few hours each month and read to your loved one or spend time with your loved one. And they have, pet therapy or music therapy. And too many times people wait until pretty much the very end of life before they're like, oh, maybe we should engage with hospice. And then not planning or preparing for funeral arrangements, that can be $10,000, $15,000 for a funeral. And if you don't have your plans in place, not only the financial stress of like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for dad's funeral? But also, just like I said before, the emotional stress of, I don't know, does dad want scripture? I mean, what does he want? What are his favorite songs? How would he want his funeral to unfold? So having these conversations, we all need to put our plans in place. So it's okay to do this as a family and say, I'm going to be putting my funeral arrangements together. What are your wishes, mom and dad?
For sure. And I was just reminded of kind of a thought process. There's a lot to, what people's wishes are. And, all people have had family members that say, don't you ever put me in a nursing home ever. But what does that look like? What does it look like for you, for your families? Do we want to age in place? Do we have family members that are living in a hole or on a hill? So walkers and wheelchairs would be almost impossible to get in and out of the car to get to the doctor's offices. Thinking about housing situations now before it's a crisis, like are all the bedrooms upstairs and they're not going to be able to navigate the steps? There's so many things, but there are a lot of families that are thinking about aging in place and how can I age in place and I will hire a caregiver. But those thoughts are intentional. Those are very, very intentional thoughts. This is what my hope is. This is what I want to do. But those considerations on the housing of, are we downsizing? Are we right sizing? Are we in an intentional retirement community? Or are we in a graduated place where it's kind of like a retirement community, but as our care needs escalate, our care can escalate on that facility. You don't have to move. There's so many thoughts, and none of them are right or wrong. It's just the thought process that you got to think about those types of things now and what you really, really want.
Well, and the other thing is too, when I ask moms and dads, because my client is the whole family, right? Because what happens to one person in the family absolutely has an effect on everyone else in the family. And so the thing I want to say about aging in place at home, 88% of people want to age in place at home. And so when I ask moms and dads, what are your goals as you age? It's always the same. I want to age in place at home, but I don't want to be a burden on my kids. But guess who is calling me for an aging plan because they're burned out? It's the adult kids. And so one of the things that we do with our families is we educate them on, okay, this is what aging in place looks like. This is how much it could potentially cost. I have clients paying $25,000 a month in home care and geriatric care managers coming in. But they're like, well, that's what mom and dad wanted. And so that's how we're going to spend their money. But what we do with families is we just outline pros and cons of staying in place at home. And what if you spend all the money on home care and now you've realized this isn't working, or mom's not safe, or you can't find reliable caregivers, because that's usually the problem. Now you might have unintentionally jeopardized their opportunity of getting into a quality care community because you spent all the money on home care. Does that make sense? So the decisions that we make now will have an impact on future care options. And so that's why with our aging plans and family meetings, we have to educate our families so they can make informed decisions on what's the right fit for them, and that they understand what they're getting into with different long-term care communities and the cost of those. All right, so what to expect, end of life considerations. So we work with our families really, from the aging plan or crisis management all the way through end of life. So we follow our families throughout that entire journey with, frequent check-ins. How are you doing? Educating them through, okay, now dad has progressed into this level of dementia, and this is what you're going to start seeing with behavior changes and end of life. So I spend many hours per week with families, helping them understand what to look for, and how to cope with when that time comes that their parents are starting to do what we call transitioning, which is the dying process. So the goal is to have families be educated so that they're less scared when they start seeing breathing changes. The longer the time between breaths, the closer that death is going to be. Skin color changes, it's called modeling. And so when we look at our clients, modeling is like purple bruises on their extremities, on their feet, their ankles, their legs, their arms. And so we educate our families about, these are things you're going to see as your loved one as their body starts shutting down. Skin color changes is called modeling. It's purple bruises. It's because their circulation is poor. We let them know that if you try to force your loved one who's trying to die to eat or drink, they could choke to death. And it also can cause more pain trying to push them to eat or drink. It's just better to let them decide if they want to eat or drink on their own, and not try to push them or force them to eat or drink, because it can cause death to happen as well if they choke to death. Because a lot of times people, when they start dying, they're not eating regular cheeseburgers. Everything's got to be ground up or pureed. So we encourage families, and this is just a general list, so everybody's a little bit different, but as a rule, not pushing people to eat or drink. They'll also appear non-responsive, this is called life review. So mom might be laying in the hospital bed and she just seems like she's not coherent and she may not be interacting with you. That's called life review, where they're literally going through their whole life from childhood on up, about just reminiscing and, just thinking about what they've done in their life, their accomplishments and all those types of things. And it's really helpful. That's just part of that dying process. We encourage our families, keep talking with your loved one, even though you don't think that they're listening or that they're coherent. Keep talking to them. We do know that hearing is the last sense to go, so to speak. So keep talking to them. Share your favorite memories. Mom, I loved it when you used to braid my hair, or when you used to make my Easter dress. Share those favorite memories, because those are things that your loved one is going to be able to hear you. They may not respond. Let them know how much, your loved one means to you. Mom, I love how you taught me all of these life skills, and the marriage that you and dad had gave me, the tools I needed to be able to also find a healthy spouse for me and our future kids. How your loved one has touched your lives, your kids' lives. The more that you can share, the better it's going to be. I've just seen too many awful deaths because families just didn't do this and their loved one really struggled. And it's very painful to watch this. Play music that your loved one enjoys. Maybe it's hymns, or maybe it's the harp, or maybe it's AC/DC, who knows? But play the music that you know that your loved one enjoys. Hospice will help medicate your loved one to keep them comfortable. So if you are there, at hospital bedside or at home at the hospital bedside, and they're starting to get squirmy or restless or reaching out, where they look like they're uncomfortable. Hospice usually provides, a pack of medication, so that when that starts, because it will most likely happen. So when that happens, you've got the medication that your loved one needs. Sometimes you also have to give your loved one permission to pass. Mom, it's okay. I'm going to take care of dad. Or all of us kids, you've raised us to be healthy people, and we'll make sure that we're going to watch over each other and take care of each other. Sometimes people make the promise of, I'll never put dad in a nursing home. And we call that the promise. And Allison touched on that a little bit. Really avoid saying that, because you can't guarantee that you're not going to have to at some point put your dad in a memory care facility or in a nursing home. And then there's like 17,000 layers of guilt. But we help our clients work through that, because a lot of families make that promise. If faith or spirituality is important to them, hospice has a chaplain, or you can also bring in your own religious leader and to visit them or give them last rites, or whatever faith that your loved one is. You can also read scripture. A lot of the hospice companies have volunteers that can, read the Bible or whatever it is that is going to be comforting for your loved one. And take breaks. Too many times we see families just sitting at the bedside for hours on end and days on end. And then, what if mom doesn't die for a week and a half, and you're just so utterly exhausted that then you end up getting sick, and then you don't have the energy and the emotional ability to really handle that funeral as well as you could, because you're already so mentally exhausted. You'll also need energy for that funeral and to help support. Maybe you have a surviving parent, and they're going to need some support. So I know it's really hard, and we're always kind of tempted to sit at the bedside until the death happens, but just take some shifts to get some good rest, go home, take a shower, take care of yourself along the way as well. A lot of families will just, kind of divide and conquer so that their parent is never alone. That's not always feasible, because people live all across the country, or if you're an only child, or maybe you just don't have the relationship with your loved one who's dying was unhealthy and toxic or abusive, then that's a whole different webinar. But you do need to manage, need to manage your time and your energy to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. What to expect in end of life considerations. Know that people in the dying process seem to have some control over when they die. I've had a lot of, I've been in this space for over 30 years. So I've been with literally thousands of families in this whole process. And sometimes just when the daughter leaves to go get lunch, that's when mom takes her last breath. But maybe that's what mom wanted. Maybe she didn't want her daughter to see her pass away. So there is some ability, it seems, that people can manage and time when they pass away. On the flip side, we've had a lot of seniors or a lot of people dying that they waited until that daughter could fly in from Arizona and say her goodbyes to mom. So there is some sense that they do have some control over when they die. Some wait for families to get all there and be with them. Some wait for permission to be given. Some want to make sure that they can still tell them how they impacted their lives. And this is a huge one. Clear the air. If there's anything you need to get off your chest, do so before he or she passes, because death is final. And I've had too many adult kids say, I missed my opportunity to tell dad I loved him, or to tell dad, this is how you impacted my life, and you never get another chance. So One more other thing before we start to close out is reaching out. Don't be scared or surprised if your loved one who's been laying almost in a comatose position starts to sit up and like literally reach out towards the end of the hospital bed. The theory behind that is that they're seeing other loved ones who have died before them, and they're like welcoming them into death. So don't be afraid if they start reaching out or say things like, I'm ready, I'll be right there. Don't be scared. And so we teach our families about all of these things and much, much more, but this is just kind of a down and dirty considerations and what to do or what to understand about the dying process. Okay. The grab and go binder, this is just a very general checklist of, accounts, passwords, estate documents, funeral arrangements, military records, divorce decrees, litigation. Here's all of our emergency contacts, our medical providers, all that kind of stuff. There's a hard copy, and then there's an e-binder or digital binder as well. And there's also a special needs section and a business section, just because a lot of my clients are business owners. And God forbid something happens to you, someone needs to know your succession plan, who you use for payroll, who's your corporate attorney, who's your corporate financial advisor. So there's a business section in there too. And then what we're going to just talk about real quick is really, if any of this is hitting home for you, we help families literally in every situation, whether they're proactive planning and starting to see the red flags that maybe their parents are not doing well at home, which means weight loss, dementia, memory impairment, falls, ER visits, dings on the car is probably a good sign that maybe they shouldn't be driving anymore. So if any of this is hitting home for you and you want to learn more, you can schedule a complimentary 30-minute consult with me or my teammates, and we are happy to go over more of an individual nature of what we can do to help add value to your life.
So we have Annalee's contact information here. And again, everybody's going to get a copy of today's slides along with the recording on how to reach out directly to Annalee and schedule that free consultation. So Annalee, it's always a pleasure. I love what you guys are doing, and it is so important. And the thing is life does get busy, and we do kind of tend to put these things on the table, on the shelf of what we're going to get to, and then something happens, and or sometimes it happens to somebody else and we're reminded, oh my goodness, I need to take care of this. So I hope if you were taking notes today that, kind of a takeaway, what do you already have in place for you and your family, your spouse, your parents, and kind of really taking a deeper dive on those things. Guys, this webinar, we do webinars every week on, planning for special needs and key hot buttons and hot topics as it relates to planning for loved ones with a disability. All of our webinars live on our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to for free. It's Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. Today's slides, you're going to have a link in here. You can just click this link and it'll have the upcoming webinars. So that way, if you have, very specific topics that you want to listen in on, you can register for those that are upcoming as well. We work on a collaborative team here at Consolidated Planning Group. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. And if you too want to go deeper with us, we do offer free consultations. So you can hover over this QR code. It'll take you to a scheduling link to where you can schedule directly with us. So thanks so much, everyone. It's certainly been our pleasure being here with you today. You guys will get an email with the slides and a link to the recording. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you, Annalee, and I look forward to partnering with you again soon. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for tuning tuning into the Care Right podcast. We hope today's discussion has provided you with valuable insights. If so, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with others who might find it helpful. Remember, Care Right is more than just a podcast. It's a community dedicated to supporting family caregivers with comprehensive care planning, crisis management, and resources for every stage of aging. Stay connected with us for future episodes as we continue to explore essential topics in aging planning, elder care, and financial planning. Until next time, take care, plan wisely, and remember, you're not alone in your caregiving journey.